Before we get into today's episode, just want to mention, if you're not already subscribed, if you could go over to the Photo Banter YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, it'd be much appreciated. I'm going to be uploading more video content as well as the video podcast every week, so definitely keep your eyes peeled for that. So just go over there, hit subscribe at the Photo Banter YouTube channel, and it'd be much appreciated. Before we get into today's podcast, I wanted to tell you guys about PicDrop. PicDrop is an image transfer tool I've been using personally for over 5 years now. It's how I send all my photos to my clients, and I can create custom galleries online, which I can access on my laptop, mobile phone, on the go, where I can download files. It's just a really intuitive platform that was actually designed by photographers with photographers in mind, so they really understand what photographers need when they're delivering photos to clients, and they're constantly updating the platform with new tools and things you can use to just kind of streamline your workflow and make it easier when sending your photos to clients. They have a cool new scribble tool. So if you're working with a retoucher or a client, they can make notes on your photos and really just make it easy to communicate with your client and keep everything in one spot. I can't recommend it enough. It's just, for me, it's a lot better than some of the more outdated platforms like WeTransfer and Dropbox. It's just a very specific transfer tool for photographers in mind. So with today's podcast, with the promo code BANTER, you'll get 2 months free of PicDrop. All you got to do is go over to picdrop.com, enter the promo code BANTER, and you'll get 2 months free. So definitely go give it a try. Let me know what you guys think. And without further ado, we'll get into today's episode. Welcome back to the Photo Banter podcast. I'm your host, Alex Gagne, and on today's episode, I welcome on photographer Nora Lalle. Nora is a photographer based in San Francisco, California, and is also the founder and editor of Pamplemousse Magazine, a magazine completely devoted to film photography. In this interview, I speak to Nora about how she got into photography, her experience working at various galleries, and how she started the Pamplemousse Magazine, and much, much more. Really excited to have Nora on the podcast. She makes a beautiful magazine. Definitely urge you guys to go check it out. It's a really cool magazine because anybody can submit their work to it. So I'll put the link in the show notes and you can go check it out. But without further ado, here's the Nora Lalle interview. 1, 2, 3. All right, I know welcome on Nora Lalle. Nora, excited to have you here. We have mutual friends from my friend Ando and been aware of your magazine for years now, Pamplemousse. So excited to talk to you. But I guess to start off, like, where do you grow up and how do you kind of first initially discover photography?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I grew up here in San Francisco and very proud to be from the city and still living in the city, inspired by San Francisco all the time. When I was in middle school, my dad signed me up for like a week-long darkroom photography class over the summer. And that kind of was my introduction to photography, to old cameras, to film. I had a lot of fun. The photos were not very good, but it was still just really fun to like discover that process. And I would say like I was hooked. I've been shooting film and using analog cameras ever since, and studied it a little bit in high school, college, and I've just always like leaned on photography as a practice, a creative practice, something that helps me get out of my head. It definitely came back into my life more significantly during the pandemic. I moved out here to the Richmond, outer Richmond district of San Francisco, and there was like not a lot to do during the pandemic. I was unemployed by choice, on the extra unemployment, and just picked up a camera and started walking around and felt like it was important to start documenting what was happening during the pandemic in the neighborhood. So photography has always been really important to me, both for myself, but also professionally. And it's just something I couldn't imagine not doing.
Yeah, San Francisco, I've been out here a couple of times in the last year, and it is an amazing city. Like, in my experience, there's just so many like photographers and artists, and there's like, every time I come in here, there's like a show. Like the other night, me and Ando went to, I think it was Adobe Bookstore.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a little gallery, and it's just like I live in Boston. There's like an art scene, but not like here.
Yeah.
It seems like there's just a lot going on. It's a lot of like DIY, people that's kind of making stuff happen, right?
Totally. And Ando is one of the people that makes stuff happen the most, really like inspired by everything he does. But there's always some pop-up gallery, community event, a lot going on, and we have a really awesome community here, both art and just the photo community in general. Seems like there's always something for people to do and connect, so it's great.
When you first kind of picked up a camera, what do you think kind of attracted you to photography initially? What was the kind of spark for you think?
Well, I'm a very visual person. I've always been artistic, and I think I just like see the world in photographs. Like I'm very observant, and it was just a way to document what I was seeing, and use my point of view and my composition and like basically capture what I find interesting in the day to day. And that felt inspiring and powerful.
And what was the first camera you were kind of messing around with when you picked it up?
Yeah, well, originally, like, I think my mom had an old film camera that I borrowed, but for a long time I was just using a Minolta SRT 101, which is like a classic SLR. They're super heavy, but not very expensive, or they didn't used to be. And it really helped me master the basics, you know, it's all manual with aperture, shutter speed, all of that. So that I think was what I was using for a long time, through college and stuff.
And what were you kind of taking pictures of when you first got into it?
Random stuff, you know. I tend to not take a lot of pictures of people. I take a lot of pictures of like urban like scenes and streets, and I wouldn't say it's street photography because there's no people, but like weird stuff I find on the street and like strange sort of scenes that I come across in life. I don't often like pick a location to go shoot. I usually like just find like what I am looking for when I'm walking around. Landscapes though, I guess you could say too, but sometimes more like industrial, like not traditional like landscapes, but
yeah. You live in an interesting neighborhood like here in the Richmond where it's like I love coming here because the architecture, I mean, and we're talking about it, it's like all the houses are like different colors. Like one can be pink, one can be blue, then it's white.
Yeah.
And then you're only like 10 blocks to the beach.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's the interesting thing about San Francisco. There's so many different kind of looks. Like you could be in the woods in like 20 minutes and then you're in the city and it's kind of a mix of things.
Yeah. And this neighborhood feels a little suburban almost because it's like pretty chill, but there's just lots of like interesting, quirky things that I happen to find.
And are you like someone who always has their camera with them, or do you kind of go out like with an idea in mind, or like how do you kind of operate?
I try. I have one in my bag today. I feel like when I go for walks around the neighborhood, I try to always have a camera. I would say my photography practice has been less often these days, and I'm like hoping to prioritize it more. I haven't had any like specific ideas or projects I've been working on recently, because you know you can't like. Creativity just comes and goes. So I'm hoping that if I just keep taking photos more often, that I'll start to maybe have more ideas that I want to explore. But I do always try to have a camera with me.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because, like, I know how it is running this podcast and then doing my own photography. Like, how do you balance that? Because, like, I can only imagine, like, running a print magazine and doing everything you do, like, making time for your own photography. Because at the end of the day, you obviously love the magazine, but you got into it because you love taking pictures yourself. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah. It's been hard to balance. I would say most of my creative energy has been put towards the magazine recently, and I definitely have to make time for my own photography. And I think it's also been an interesting few years of reflecting on who I am as an artist and my strengths in my career and like what I'm after. And I think photography has taken a back burner professionally. I'm just looking at it as something that I love to do and always will want to do. You know, I've had work in group shows, like I've had stuff out there, but I feel like my strengths and interests are more in the editor, curator, creative direction kind of roles. So I'm just kind of figuring out where photography fits in. It might just be a personal passion, but it's still like, why I got into this. So it's always going to be there.
Because like, I don't know, growing up, like, did you have like, did you grow up in like a creative family with artists, or like, was your family supportive of like your creative endeavors?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my mom, I would say, is an artist. She, took photography in college and I think was an art major, and then she worked for the city for like her whole career, but now in retirement has embraced her ceramic practice, and she's always been making pottery like my whole life, but now that she's retired she's had a lot more time to do it. So I definitely get some of that from my mom. And I think my dad is also a creative person, I would say. He doesn't have like a specific art practice, but he's very creative. And I think I definitely get inspiration from them. My parents have always been very supportive of my artistic endeavors and the magazine, and I consider them part of the team. They're always at my events serving drinks and helping me carry boxes, and
That's awesome.
it's really nice to have that support. It's definitely a team effort. You'll see my dad's name on the masthead. He's the copy editor. So yeah, it's a family effort.
I'd be the worst copy editor. That's like you gotta have a real skill for that.
Yeah, no, he catches some good stuff. So it's important with print, like it's permanent. So we gotta make sure those I's are dotted.
Did you always think you were gonna pursue like a career like in the creative kind of art field, or like what do you think you were gonna do?
I don't know. I was one of those people that never had a good answer to like, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
And I feel like even throughout college and like school and stuff, I wasn't quite sure. I think having some professional experience like at art institutions was helpful because it sort of steered me away from that. I just didn't feel like it was the right fit in certain contexts. So I think I'm very independent. I'm very ambitious. Like, I think it made sense for me to kind of do my own thing. But it was important to get some experience at established institutions and sort of see what that would be like. But I feel like you kind of think you know what you want to do, and then you try it, and then you're not sure, and then you kind of find out what you're going to do.
Yeah.
For me, at least.
I think it's just like I think it never ends. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like, and it's constantly, I mean, you know this, like running your own independent magazine, it's like, it's just trying to keep it going.
Yeah, and it's been an adventure, and who knows, like, if this will be something I just did for a couple years that was cool, or if it will actually lead to my career. I'm kind of trying to figure that out.
Yeah, me too. I'm trying to figure it out.
I think everyone's always just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, pretty much. You mentioned college. Like, what did you study in school?
I went to like a small liberal arts school where we were just encouraged to take lots of different subjects, and I decided to major in sociology because it was just the most interesting classes to me. I'm super interested in people, and yeah, so that was just like a fun, interesting, department to explore. I was a psych minor, so definitely like also took some art classes, took a lot of photography in college. We had a pretty big black and white darkroom set up at my school, but I didn't major in art. And then I did go to like a 1-year photography school program in Paris after undergrad, mostly just to get a student visa because I wanted to live abroad.
Yeah.
But I did study photography for a year there, which was incredible and really fun.
Yeah, it's interesting, like going to school for sociology and say you like people, but you don't photograph people, really.
Yeah, that's true.
Why?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? It's like it's almost like a separate thing for you, kind of.
Yeah, a little bit. Or like I've never felt confident enough or felt like I felt about like street photography where you're taking photos of people like candidly.
Yeah.
I feel like that takes a lot of skill and like just a certain type of person. So I really respect street photographers for that. Portraits, it's just like it's something I've tried to practice and do, and like it's just like not my thing though.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's more like it's like my photography is more like observations about the world, which is kind of like related to like sociology as opposed to like documenting people.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, definitely, that makes sense.
Yeah.
When you look at like photographers, were there any photographers kind of early on that kind of influenced you or kind of inspired you? Like, were some of the photographers?
Yeah. Well, so I would say Sophie Kahl is one of my favorite artists. I don't know if I would call her just a photographer. And she definitely has this really interesting, I would say, like sociological perspective to her work. Like she found an address book on the street, and then it had, I think, the person's name in it, but before returning it, she like went through all of the contacts in the address book and called the people and asked them about the owner of the book.
Wow.
And then like did a photography project, and she famously like got hired as a housekeeper or like a maid at a hotel in Venice and would go into the rooms and photograph people's stuff and like write down observations about it. And then she got fired. But like she's made some really interesting projects like that. She just had a show at Frankel Gallery actually, and she was there, and I met her at the opening. But so stuff like that where you're combining text and image and experience and like people's lives. So she's definitely been a major inspiration. I'm trying to think of any others off the top of my head.
Yeah, because you kind of do that. I know you have the one project. I think it's called, was it Then and Now?
Yeah.
And it's like it's kind of, I don't know if you call it like collage.
Mixed media
Yeah,
collage.
yeah.
Totally. Well, and then that project I paired found photos. Like I love found photos, like stuff you find at flea markets or people's garage sales. And I paired those with my own photographs and tried to like make this connection that it kind of made it seem like the photos were taken in the same place, but they weren't at all. So I'm kind of like constructing a narrative and allowing people to make connections and assumptions. But at the end of the day, they actually had nothing to do with each other. So yeah, that's like and I really like mixed media collage. And I feel like that has been a more like successful, fulfilling practice where I'm incorporating photography, but it's not the focus.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It just reminds me that like photography is just a tool, and you can use it in so many different ways.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like the storytelling too. It's fun to kind of play around with like narrative and storytelling through visual stuff and leave some stuff up to interpretation, but also explore the idea.
That's cool. And I think I saw when you were in school, there was was Underexposed Photography Magazine. Was that what
Oh my
it?
God, yeah. I was on the magazine staff in
Was
college.
that
Wow, you did a deep dive on me. Holy shit. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, we had a photography magazine at my college. I actually forgot about that until you just said that.
What was your kind of role? Were you shooting photos or what?
No, I think I was helping curate and like pick the photos.
Okay.
Which makes sense with what I'm doing now. Yeah, we had like we would meet and produce little zines basically. I truly forgot about that until this moment.
Was it just kind of stories about what was going on in the school or what kind
No, I think we picked like a theme and then we just had members of the campus and community like submit around the theme, and then we just like produced. It was mostly just photos. I don't think there was a lot of text.
That's cool.
I should dig out some of those. I probably have them at my parents' house. I should look at that.
Yeah, definitely.
That should be on my resume.
Did you always have like a love of magazines and print?
Yeah, definitely. I think for some reason, yeah, I mean, growing up, I loved like fashion magazines and loved like, Teen Vogue and like stuff like that, and would cut out pictures and make collages. And then I remember in art school and in different times, like being encouraged to make printed stuff of my work, and got introduced to the concept of a zine, and just felt like with shooting film, it made a lot of sense to print out what I was doing. And then when I got back to San Francisco around like early 2017, I just decided to like make some little zines, and that kind of started, that kind of led me to the magazine as it is today. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you mentioned going to photography school in Paris.
Yes.
How was that experience, getting to live abroad in Paris, and like what kind of work were you making in that program?
Yeah, it was a dream come true. I had studied abroad for a semester and just obviously fell in love and decided I needed to live a cliche of the American girl in Paris. Why not? I had the opportunity to do it. Just being able to study art in a city like Paris was incredible. There were often photography exhibitions, multiple going on at once. So we were looking at like the history and some contemporary photography, but also making work. It was a mix. I learned some like studio digital stuff that I feel like was important, but taught me that I didn't want to be a commercial photographer. I would take a lot of pictures around town, out and about. I did a cool project where I took some photos in different neighborhoods and then traced like a map of the neighborhood and then made collages with the photos and the maps. So that was like another sort of mixed media project. And just using like the graphic elements of a map combined with like photos. So yeah, it was a mix of stuff, but it was definitely really fun. And we had certain assignments we had to do. And I do remember making a book as like a final project. I think it was printed with like Blurb, like one of these sort of on-demand print.
Yeah.
Nothing fancy, but it was like a hardcover book. And I think originally I was like, I have to put everything I've made in this year into this book. And my teacher was like, well, why don't you pick one thing? And it was like a good lesson in focusing on one concept or idea in a publication and how that can be more effective than just like, here's a whole bunch of photos I took.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you feel like going to school for photography was like a beneficial experience, like kind of having that?
Yeah, I think some of the like history and context and just being able to see photographs out in the world on display, and then learning like different stuff from printing to, post like Photoshop, like some of the more technical stuff was helpful. And it did, I think, like teach me that if anything, I'm pursuing like a more fine art direction, and that commercial photography wasn't going to be my thing.
Yeah, dealing with clients is not fun.
Yeah, and I just like don't want to spend a lot of time in front of a computer like editing.
Yeah.
I feel like with film, the thing I love about film is like if you nail the exposure, yeah, you're gonna have to make a few minor adjustments, but like it should be pretty much good as is.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm not that interested in spending lots hours and hours in Lightroom editing. I don't like I'm impressed with people that do that. So
I was talking to my friend who's like a retoucher because I'm the same way. I'm not like interested in like I can do basic retouching and stuff.
yeah.
My friend explained it to me. He's like he views it like almost like a video game.
Yeah.
Like he sits in front of the computer and it's like this puzzle he's putting together,
Right.
and it's like interesting to view it that way. I'm the same way. I just want to kind of
Yeah.
be out there and make work and just kind of move on to the next.
Yeah, and for me the fun part is like getting it back and figuring out like what connections between my images and how to present them in like groups or pairs, and kind of like how they communicate with each other, as opposed to like the nitty-gritty of like the editing. And the hope is that they look pretty good already on film.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And do you feel like it's time taking a while to find your voice as a photographer? Like, has your work kind of changed a lot over the years, or like, how do you kind of view your work?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say there have also been plenty of moments, especially in the last year or so, of like imposter syndrome and like being in spaces where I'm around peers who are making interesting work and just feeling like I don't really have anything interesting to say with my photography, or it's just something for me in a way that I document my life and the world. And then on the other side of that, like feeling like I am actually putting something out there that's, important and a point of view. But it's been interesting to see it evolve, and it's changed with like different cameras and different formats that I've explored. And I still think like it takes a long time to sort of figure out what that voice is, and it's constantly changing.
What do you think like interests you in terms of like photography now? Like, what kind of piques your interest? Do you find like I know you mentioned it, like walking around the Richmond and stuff, but like, what is it you're looking for? What do you think it interests you photographically?
Stuff that's like a little funny or ironic or quirky or out of place. Like I like to find interesting moments in sort of the mundane, in the day to day, and like challenge people. Like if they see one of my photos, to like maybe next time they're out and about to like look for something like that. Like I'm always taking pictures of random furniture people have left on the street, and these like strange little tableaus I happen upon. And I think like the randomness of that, and like it always feels unstaged but like slightly interesting. So yeah, just like weird stuff that I happen upon, and just being observant in a way where you like notice little details like that is a fun way to like move throughout the world.
Yeah, it's like it's the hardest thing to do. Like I mostly do portraiture, but lately like coming here, it's like this fun thing for me to like walk around the neighborhood and try, because it's a whole different skill set.
Yeah.
It's like I almost struggle with it. Like it's like too much. Like I've talked about before, where like some people go to like New York or like,
Yeah.
a big city like this, and they're like can shoot everything. Where I'm like I don't know where to start. Like I feel like overwhelmed in a sense.
That makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
We mentioned a little bit your project Then and Now.
Yeah.
Like, how did that kind of come about, and like what was your kind of goal with that?
Well, actually, that I started working on that when I was in art school in Paris. So there are, of the ones that I showed at like an exhibition a few years ago, some of them were the old ones from 2014. And I think I had gone to this like cool industrial area in Bordeaux visiting a friend, taken a lot of photos there, really liked how those photos turned out, and had this collection of old photos lying around. And then I just kind of decided that it would be fun to kind of compare these different scenes of like what I took and then what people have sort of photos that belonged to someone at one time and then they got discarded, or that I found them. And I look for like found photos with something interesting in them as well, with like weird expressions or like strange composition. There's a whole like subculture of people who are obsessed with what I think they call it like vernacular photography, like stuff taken by just regular people for whatever reason. And so it was just getting inspired by some stuff I had found, inspired by this project I did in Bordeaux, and then deciding to use thread and like different materials to make connections between the photos. They're very delicate. They're very small little collages. But I think it just sort of made sense to me to put those things together. And then it was a few years ago, as I was preparing for this exhibition, I decided to make some new ones with other photos I had taken recently. And I'm always collecting found photos, so there were more that I had. And it just made sense to build off of that idea and kind of create these connections, but also kind of fake the connections and sort of see if I could not dupe people, but just make people think about what they're looking at, to not always believe. And I would put these little captions on them that says that they're like same place, different year. And a lot of people would ask me like, oh, is that your family? Is that your grandma? Like they would think that I was personally related to the
Well, that's what I was going to ask about.
So not at all.
Yeah. So where are you finding the found photos?
Flea markets. There was like a store in Paris that was like a photo store that would have like a big bin of them. Sometimes you can find albums at like thrift stores and flea markets that just have photos stuffed in them.
Are you looking for like a specific time period in most of the?
No, it's really random. Like it's just something interesting about the photo, whether it's like what people are wearing, their like position, where they are. It's hard. I know when I see it. And so, yeah, it was fun to like almost like trick the audience into thinking there was like a personal connection and like a more concrete connection between these two places and images, when actually it's just totally fabricated.
And how is it going back to a project? Because I think it was like a 10-year gap.
It was, at least.
So how is it kind of going back to a project you worked on 10 years ago and then kind of restarting it again? Like, do you feel like you had a different approach? Because obviously 10 years later, you know so much more about photography and shot a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think I definitely was a little more intentional about the pairings of like which photos with mine and which old photos. I changed the format of them a little bit. Like the actual shape of the piece of paper was a little different. And yeah, just, also I think the first series was pretty much limited in terms of my own photography of like that set of photos I took in one place, whereas the new versions are photos I've taken all over the place and mostly medium format squares. So there was just like a technical difference too.
Yeah.
That was like interesting for me to play around with, like shape and that kind of thing. But it was fun to just revisit the idea, and I think as a group they look pretty cool together.
And is that something you think you'll keep doing, or is it kind of done at this point?
Yeah, I'm trying to, like, I have a whole stack of really interesting, cool found photos that I really want to do something with. I also found like an album of like what looks like an office, like from like a workplace, where half of the album was from like their holiday party and half of it is just like scenes from the office that they work in. And the album physically itself is very cool. So I kind of want to do something with that. And I bought on eBay like a whole lot of, it was called like Alligator People 1950s Florida, and I couldn't not buy that. I bought it for like $8.
What are you searching on eBay to find?
I know, like found photos or family photos. I don't even remember. And it was like $8 for like 60, and they're in color and they're so weird.
Yeah.
And I published some of them in an old version of the magazine, but I want to like do something with those to sort of tell stories. So I think the then and now thing will probably be over, but the mixed media collage and incorporating found images, I definitely think I'll always do.
Are you like a big collector of things? Like,
yeah.
Okay. What are some of the other stuff you collect?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I feel like I have a lot of little things in my apartment, like, little frames and little bottles and little boxes and cameras and camera related things like film cases and old light meters and
Andrew, that's cool. Like
art.
Yeah.
Yeah, like found art, but like, yeah, like just photo related objects.
It is fun thing.
Books.
Yeah, but yeah, I go up and down with books. Like it gets out of control quick,
Hmm.
and then if you ever have to move, it's the biggest pain in the ass. But yeah,
Truly.
it is fun. It's just collecting, so it's like a little game.
Ceramics, like vases, like just little objects that I like.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And I thought you got to exhibit that work at the was the Book and Job galleries,
Yeah.
and how was that? And like, how did you kind of approach the exhibiting of that project? I guess.
Yeah. Well, that was an incredible opportunity, and I had actually, it was just a case of like, although I would say I'm maybe talented or have like a point of view with my art, it is definitely a lot of like who you know and the connections you make. So I met someone when I was working at Frankel Gallery downtown. I met a guy named Kyle Smith, and he was working at a different gallery. He invited me to be part of a group show, and then he started working with the guys that run Book and Job, helping them program stuff. And he basically said, like, send us an idea for an exhibition. And I had a combination of the collage then and now work, and then some black and white darkroom prints that were like also photographs I had taken like back in college, I think, of some places in San Francisco. And then I revisited those places and photographed them in 2022, 2023. So I sort of presented like both of these projects intertwined of like a reflection on places and how they change. And there's a couple different approaches to that. Whereas the collages were like these two different photographs. And then my other photographic work was like recognizing the similarities, but how time has passed with these different locations. So it was an incredible experience. I felt a little like overwhelmed with like the platform, and like that's a great gallery. They have amazing programming. They're Adrian and Austin who run it are amazing, and they were so supportive and helpful. And even just to have like the vinyl sticker of my name on the wall was like and I had one of my best friends, Kat Marcus, is a sign painter, and she hand painted the sign on their window. Wow. So overall it was so much fun, and I got to like really embrace the creativity, and they gave me just like, they liked my idea, and they just was like, yeah, let's go for it.
It must have been cool because you obviously prior opening, and like people kind of get to interact with the art, and like,
yeah,
because so much of being a photographer is like sometimes you don't really show any of your work.
Yeah.
So it's like, that must have been a cool experience just to have people come.
Yeah. And a lot of people had a lot of questions about the collages and were like confused, but in a good way. And they like, so it was fun to kind of see people interact with it.
No, it's awesome. And being that you've like worked in galleries and you got to exhibit your stuff, like anything you've learned or advice you give to like photographers who are interested in kind of getting in the mix with galleries and exhibiting their work?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like, again, I think nurturing community and a network and contacts, and like just putting yourself out there, going to shows, seeing what kind of work is being shown, thinking outside the box. Like maybe your local cafe wants to have art on the wall. Like, you don't necessarily have to have a empty wall gallery space to make it worthwhile. Learning from what you see and just absorbing information, and putting yourself out there. It's hard to face like rejection, and it's hard, and like a lot of galleries are not going to not going to respond to like a cold email of like, look at what I'm making.
Yeah.
But I think educating yourself about what's happening in contemporary photography, getting feedback from people, critical feedback is helpful. And it's definitely a hard thing to navigate, though. And I'm actually looking at like a little plug for myself.
Yeah, plug
I've
away.
decided to start offering like some consulting services around making printed materials and printed stuff, but also navigating like the art world and anyone who might need some help preparing for a gallery show or looking for opportunities like that. So it's definitely not easy, but I think the first step is just showing up to stuff and seeing what else is happening, and then getting inspiration.
Yeah, definitely. Because was that the first gallery you worked for? You worked at a couple of places, right?
Yeah, that was the first like main photography gallery I worked for. I had interned for Robert Koch Gallery, which is also in the same building, 49 Geary. And I had worked for the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco before the gallery, which is the De Young Museum and the Legion of Honor Museum here in San Francisco. that was more of like a visitor experience role. I was hoping to move up, but it wasn't in the cards.
Yeah.
So I had like the museum institution side sort of, and then the gallery side. But that was the first like very high level commercial art gallery I worked for. Yeah, like officially.
What did you learn from that experience?
It was definitely interesting. Got a lot of amazing access. They have an incredible roster of artists, so having access to even like looking at prints from some of these artists was incredible. I learned that there's just a lot involved in that world when it comes to the exhibitions, the art fairs, the clients, the artists themselves, and it's just interesting when you're sort of advocating for the artists, trying to get their work seen in different contexts, and just trying to support artists in a certain way. But at Frankel, there has sort of like a certain level of success already with those artists. And they manage some incredible estates like the Arbus estate, the Winogrand estate. So just being close to art like that, like there's a couple weeks that they do inventory of all their prints. And so to be part of that was incredible. And meeting some of the artists, and also getting to sort of learn just the process of putting an exhibition together, groups of students coming in to see it. It was just, it was fun, and it was intense, and it was eye-opening, and I still really value like the people I worked with there and everything I learned. I think I did learn that like that world maybe wasn't for me.
Because it's like at the end of the day, those galaxies. I'm interested to talk about it because I don't know much about the fine art world. I've always just kind of worked in editorial and like commercial and stuff. So it's like, obviously, like Winogrand, Arbus, they're just managing their archive. But for like the photographers that are still living and making work, like Alex Soth and
they represent Richard Mizrak and like people like that.
Yeah, like what is the job of those galleries? What do they do? Because it's like it's not like Alex Soth is having a show every month. It's like very few often. So it, like, what is
Well, sales is a big thing. So they have a select number of prints that the artist makes of a certain series, and they're trying to get, them to be able to be a working artist means that they're selling prints of their work. I think we're in an interesting place, like with fine art and photography in general, because it's hard to justify sometimes the price of photographs because people are like, oh, you could just print another one. But that, like with a painting, it's one of one. It's an original, so you can say, oh, it costs this much money. So educating the public around like the value of photography, and then helping match like clients and collectors with certain photographers that they might be interested in. Art fairs are a big piece of it, where they travel around and set up like mini galleries and try to just get a wider audience on eyes on the work.
It's just like letting people, the art fairs is letting people know this is what we manage, and if you
kind of, I mean, they basically curate a selection of work from who they represent, and it's all for sale, but it's also fun for the public to be able to see, especially if it's in a place that like people don't always can't come to San Francisco. And then there's often requests for like press or things that come in, and just helping manage their career almost.
Oh, so they're, yeah, okay.
Yeah, like they represent that. So it's like if someone is interested in buying or connecting a photograph by Alex Soth, or connecting, like they would probably be directed to Frankel Gallery. And a lot of artists have multiple galleries that represent them, and it's collaborative.
Yeah.
But I think it's helping them like live their life as an artist and sell work, but also have opportunities and exhibitions and publications and everything like that.
No, it's really amazing. And really excited, Pamplemousse, how did that, we kind of touched on it, but like, how did that kind of initially start, and like, what was kind of your goal with the magazine?
Yeah. Well, as I said, I've always loved printed stuff, zines, photo books, especially with analog and film work. It feels like a obvious connection. I had been playing around with making a few zines of my own stuff. During the pandemic, I made something called Quaranzine, which was actually not just photography, but I opened it up on Instagram. I didn't have that many followers at the time, but opened it up and had people submit some stuff during the pandemic just to have a project to work on. And then I started working at PhotoWorks on Market Street, which is a lab here. They've been around forever.
Great lab.
Yeah, great lab. They've been around since like the late 80s. It was just at a point where I had been like unemployed for a year, wanted something to do. I've always used the lab for my own film. So I applied when they were hiring, and it was a customer service position, but that meant that I was interacting with customers who were regulars and kind of getting to know some of the people who would come through there. That's actually how I met Ando.
Okay.
Was through PhotoWorks. And it was fun to like kind of start building a network and community of other creative people. And then I was also taking a lot more photos because we had access to the lab services as part of the perk of working there.
Nice.
So I was like, damn, I'm taking all these photos. What do I do with them? So I actually started, like, if you can believe it, a monthly magazine called Pamplemousse that was just my own photographs. It was like 20 pages.
Monthly?
Yeah, it was crazy. And I maybe had like 15 or 20 friends and family subscribed. And it got boring though, because I wasn't like doing anything particularly interesting with my photography. It was just like making little magazines. And then I decided, let me make this quarterly and open it up to submissions and kind of curate it around a theme. So in 2022, I think it was, I made the first 4 like real Pamplemousse in sort of closest to what the format is now. But I did the design and it wasn't very good. And it was just one photo after the other, not much text, very simple, like zine, but still in the 8.5 by 11 format. And then I decided, I took a workshop in like the winter of 2023, and I'd realized about making magazines. And I realized that I was the editor and curator, but I needed to hire a graphic designer. That if I really wanted to take this to the next level, include interviews and articles and text, like I didn't have the skills for that. So I did. And we came out with what I consider to be the first like real issue in the summer of 2023, the human issue. And it featured mostly people I knew through PhotoWorks and the community here, mostly local artists who were emerging, like not super like traditionally successful yet, but willing to collaborate with me. And it had a few articles, it had a few interviews. It also has an open call for submission section. I actually think Ando might have a photo in that one.
Yeah, I asked him. He said, "Have you been in there?" He's like, "Oh,
yeah, he's
like,
been in there." So because the first sort of chapter of the adventure was all based around open calls for submission, I've always wanted to carry that through. Now I curate more of who I feature and reach out to people directly for the bigger features, but I always want there to be an accessible
that's
open call.
That's the coolest thing about it. I really enjoy about the magazine. Obviously, the photos are beautiful, and you do like a wide range of stuff. But it's like we were talking about, like some of these like higher fine art galleries. It's like you're not going to get through the door. Like so, it's very limiting in the scope of stuff you're going to see.
Yeah.
So I get inspired by a lot of younger photographers because they are so passionate about it. Still, they're not jaded.
Yeah.
So it's like getting fresh stuff.
Yeah.
It's not like just because of someone's name. Like, don't get me wrong, I love all the big, like, legendary photographers, but getting to see, like, whoever. And you have photographers from all around the world in this magazine.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's been cool. Like, definitely film photography has blown up again as, like, an interest for people. A lot of people had started doing it during the pandemic. And so I always want people who have, like, no experience, if they want, they can submit, and it doesn't matter really, as long as you shoot film and can connect with the theme. We love to see it. So that's been fun curating that part, and it's definitely grown a lot. It's definitely been a learning experience. I'm at a point now where it's catching up to me that I sort of put the creative ahead of the business.
Yeah.
And I'm an artist. I'm not a business person. So I knew that I wanted to make a magazine. I made some choices and was able to get it going in a real way. But now I'm reaching a point where I'm not sure how I'm going to sustain it.
Yeah.
You won't be surprised to hear that there's no money in magazines.
Yeah.
It's great that people are still making independent publications and there is like interest and support for them, but it's definitely a tough business. And I'm really grateful for the success I've had, the opportunities. I've done like international art fairs and been able to do a lot of really cool stuff and throw some cool events and do some amazing collaborations. But I'm constantly trying to figure out how I'm going to keep it going.
We gotta rally the troops because we gotta keep this thing going.
I know.
Yeah, because for people listening, I didn't mention it, but it's an all film photography magazine. So, what is it about film that you are so passionate about? You think?
Well, I feel like it's always helpful to have a niche when it comes to something like this. And it's just always been my own personal interest and passion when it comes to photography. I love the actual object of like old cameras. I think they're beautiful and really interesting. And I think it's like important to learn the basics of photography before you start having to work with a bunch of bells and whistles on a digital camera. I love the constraints that come with shooting film. Like you have a certain number of shots on a roll. You are limited by lighting conditions and certain features of your camera. And it feels like, and it's so expensive now, so it feels like every shot has to count. And it just feels like a different way to creatively kind of interact with photography. There's also a quality with the grain of film that I love. And I love like when weird stuff happens or experiments or mistakes, like it's unexpected, not knowing what you're going to get and the waiting of like having to wait for it to be processed. I also have done some darkroom printing, both black and white and color. And it's really fun to have that control over how the image is going to come out and get your hands dirty in chemistry and just really feel like you're like in it from start to finish. And there are quite a few people like artists and aspiring artists who are still holding on to film and doing large format and all kinds of different stuff. So just supporting people's passion for it so it doesn't die.
No, it's the best. I don't think it's dying anytime soon. It's just getting popular again. I love it. Nothing like going to the lab, pick up your films, and being like, I hope it came
like
out.
Getting scans back now. You know, stuff gets scanned, but or even just like being able to play around with making a print or just feel like really like engaged with the art that you're making.
Being that you worked at the lab, I've talked about this with friends. How many people would drop off their film and get scans and never pick up their negative?
Oh, most of them.
That's cool. That blows
my
mind.
Tell me about it. We actually have like a label that we put called Toss.
Yeah.
And like we ask people, and most people, especially people just dropping off disposables and stuff, decide not to pick them up. Whereas like me and some of my coworkers would always just kind of be like, are you sure? Like you don't want those negatives?
Yeah.
Because for me, like it's such a important part of the archive, and like your computer may crash, but your negatives, if you store them right, are forever.
Yeah.
Well, not forever, but
yeah,
it feels like such an important backup. And then there have been so many times when I've wanted to do a show or for whatever reason needed to rescan something bigger, print something bigger. So many people will get their negatives tossed, and they also like, if you don't pick them up within a certain amount of time, they will throw them away.
That's crazy. And in terms of like curating the magazine, that's got to be difficult because you get a lot of work sent your way. I'm sure you get a lot of amazing stuff, but it might not fit like because you have a theme every issue. Like, how do you kind of navigate that with all the stuff getting submitted, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky to have a few people helping me as editors who help kind of keep their eye out for emerging talent. And so it's usually a collaboration. Like as we come up with the theme for the issue, we kind of brainstorm like what types of projects we're interested in featuring. There have also been times when I've encountered an artist or a project and I knew I wanted to publish it, and so I kind of almost fit the theme around that. In terms of the submissions, I do get, and I'm open to getting like random emails, but what we try to do is limit submissions to like a very specific open call related to the theme.
It's like a time period during the year.
Yeah. And there are pretty specific guidelines and sort of a prompt and a question for people to answer with the image, and sometimes they can submit one or two. So it is challenging, but it always somehow comes together, and it's kind of like whatever I'm interested in and making sure it's well balanced, which, this is the balance issue, but I like to try to give the platform to people who maybe are underrepresented in other photography spaces. And there have been a few people who, for me, it was like a huge deal to get them, like just me sending a cold email. And then the fact that they were willing to do it with me was like insane.
Who's that?
Yeah, there's a photographer named Erin Springer, and I met her at like a book fair. I bought her book, very inspired by her. And I'd reached out, and she was the cover image of our the Life issue, which was winter 2023. And then there's a photographer named Thalia Gochez, and she spent a lot of time in San Francisco, but now lives in LA. And she has been doing some editorial stuff for the New York Times and is like very successful, has a really interesting point of view. And I reached out to her for the Love issue, and she was like super down. And then even in this one, there's this historic project of the Outer Sunset.
Great photos.
Yeah, and so it's this photographer named Richard Sexton who I happened to meet in New Orleans at a photo festival. Heard that he had some images of San Francisco. I'm obsessed with San Francisco, so I asked him, can I see? And they're all color positive slide images from the 1977 and 78 in the Sunset District. And I just, after he sent them to me, I was like, these are amazing. Would you ever be interested in publishing some of them? And he said yes. And now I actually recorded a podcast with him yesterday. We're doing an event with him here in San Francisco at the end of May to celebrate the portfolio and the neighborhood. So a lot of it just is like me trusting my instincts and going for it. And then it's hard to curate the open call section, but what's hard, too, is when people put themselves out there for an open call, a lot of them get rejected. We only publish maybe 10 to 20 images from that section. And what people have to remember is that this is subjective. This is my point of view, my aesthetic, my project, that like if somebody else was making it, it would look totally different. And so it is hard when you get that rejection email, but I think I want to just encourage people to keep putting themselves out there.
And I would imagine, like, sometimes it might not be bad work or anything. Like it's because also you're working under a theme,
Exactly.
so it just might not fit for that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what it is most of the time, that it's not that they're bad photos. It's just not the right fit. It also has to fit with the rest of the photos and the rest of the issue. So, yeah, it's just an interesting process. I'm lucky to have some help, creative help with the curating of each issue and the editorial choices. So it's been really great to expand my little team, and one day I hope to have all the funding and everyone's getting paid, all the team and the artists, and because I think there's that's the thing that I hate the most, is that I don't have the budget to pay people yet.
Yes. And in terms of the theme, how do you choose the theme? Like, how does that come about?
They usually just come to me randomly, or based on like a project I've seen. I mean, like this one, I had seen another magazine that had this sort of double cover that flips, and I just thought it would be fun to do something more conceptual. And I think it took us a while to land on the actual word balance, but we just felt like it was cool to have like sort of two mini magazines in one that, when put together, presented these different parts of photography, whether it's conceptually or technically. Like, for example, we have a project that's large format, black and white portraits for the most part, and then a 4x5 negative for large format is roughly the size of like a Polaroid photograph. So the complementary thing balancing that out are the Polaroids from our open call, because there's two physical things that are roughly the same size, but the image quality and everything about the images is different.
Yeah.
So yeah, just wanted to explore something more conceptual. I could give you an exclusive. I think we're leaning towards potentially black and white for the next one.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because
Heard it here first.
that'd be cool. Yeah.
I feel like we haven't done an entirely black and white issue, and it's a whole different realm.
Yeah.
And it would be fun to play around with the design and how
I hope you guys do, because so many magazines won't even print black and white.
yeah.
Not even like one picture. Like I talk to editors, like I'm like, why don't like some mags will, but like,
Well, yeah, and especially with the history of film photography and the darkroom and these like, just the way photography is, I feel like black and white could be super interesting and we would get some really cool projects. So, yeah.
and
Not an official theme announcement, but
I'm gonna keep you.
I'll put it out there.
I'm gonna be like texting you. You gonna do it? You gonna do it?
Yeah. And that won't be till the fall. I recently decided to publish twice a year.
Okay, that's good.
So our next one will be coming out sometime in the fall.
All right, that's exciting.
Yeah.
And in terms of the logistics of printing a magazine, what have you learned about that process? Because it can't be cheap to do it. Like, where do you guys print it, and like, what have you learned in this from your?
Yeah. Well, again, I'm not a business expert. The workshop that I took about making magazines was hosted by a UK-based organization called Mag Culture, and they also have a shop in London. And it was the first and one of the only things I had seen out there that was really trying to support people trying to make magazines.
Yeah.
So it was a really informative workshop. It was virtual. I had to get up at 5 a.m. because it was on UK time, but totally worth it. And they introduced me to a UK printer and a distributor. And so it became clear that there was more happening with independent magazines in the UK for some reason. And I'm sure I could have gone a different direction, but I just decided to pursue that direction. So once I had come out with a couple under this sort of more well-formed idea, I just went to London and I reached out to meet with some of these people. And I visited the printer and I met with this distributor whose job is really to help market the magazine. So basically at this point, I print in England with a company called Park Communications. They also print magazines like Kinfolk and ID. Like they print some of the biggest magazines in the world. And then because my distributor is also based in the UK, it's like fairly simple logistically to get the magazines to them. The distributor then takes care of our retail placements all over the world and my subscription mailings. So they actually have a warehouse in the States. They get a bunch of their titles over to the States on like a big pallet to the warehouse. It's not like I'm shipping things out from England. And then so it's this big network and process. It's quite complicated, but if I didn't have their support, like we wouldn't be where we are today. But they've gotten me into now like I think over 30 stores worldwide.
Wow.
And that is more of like a marketing thing because they take a percentage and then the store takes a percentage. But having it out on a shelf at a store is a huge deal for me. And the best case scenario is somebody buys it, they love it, they subscribe.
Yeah, because it's a beautifully printed magazine. It's like really nice paper. And
I was able, the England thing like seems ridiculous, but it's actually cheaper to print this quality over there for some reason, even with the exchange rate and the shipping and all of that. I spend an enormous amount of money on postage, but not from the UK, but just in general, because moving around and shipping out a physical magazine is, expensive. But for the quality of what it is, it's actually a pretty good deal. And I will say I'm proud that I have been able to break even on just the printing itself with advertisers and my subscribers.
That's awesome.
So that's a huge accomplishment. Still not breaking even when it comes to shipping, postage, paying the graphic designer. Like there's a lot of, I'm still very much in the red, but with the printing itself, we're good. And it's exciting because I'm going to London in May for a big fair over there, Photo London. And I'm going to be able to connect with some more magazine people. So there are a community of people making independent publications.
No, definitely. There's still a lot of beautiful magazines out there.
I just made a choice, though. I just decided that this was where I saw this community, this support. I'm sure there's cheaper places to get it printed, like overseas, most likely. It seems like printing in the U.S. is quite expensive for some reason. But for me, having the support of the distributor and the logistical support is worth it.
So what's like your goal with Pamplemousse moving forward? Anything else you're like hoping to work on, or?
Well, I'd hope for it to be sustaining, like self-sustaining in terms of the cost to make it and distribute it. The big goal, the big dream is, and what I'm sort of trying to work on is forming a nonprofit around the whole thing, eventually having my own space that could be sort of office / gallery / event space, shop, and community resource so that I could just do workshops and programming and kind of build out our what we do to support artists in different ways, and then obviously still make the magazine.
Yeah, I think the coolest thing about it, obviously, is the beautiful work, but the people, you've built like a community of like-minded people who have have a similar like taste level of like what they want, and I would imagine that's probably kind of the fun part of what you do, like getting to like build this community, right?
Yeah, and we do release parties and events in person, mostly in the Bay Area, but also sometimes elsewhere, and it's been really cool to bring people together around it, and I still get like this sense of joy when like a stranger wants to buy one. Like it's very vulnerable to put it out. Like it's my point of view, it's my aesthetic, it's my curatorial choices, and it feels very vulnerable to be like, I made this, now you buy it. But I'm always blown away by the support and interest, and I just want to keep building the community around it.
That's awesome. And I guess to wrap up, like, what's next for you? Obviously, maybe Black White Magazine, but any other your own personal photography, anything else you're hoping to work on this year, I guess?
Right now, I'm just trying to get back into the swing of it. I think that my actual practice of photography has sort of fallen by the wayside, kind of been put on the back burner. So just kind of stretch that muscle again. Work on some projects that I've been sort of sitting on, and I haven't taken out my medium format camera in forever. So just like use my cameras more and just get out there. And hopefully like that will lead me in a creative direction.
That's awesome. What's your medium format camera that you use?
I have a Hasselblad
Nice
500C. Yeah.
It's the best.
Can't go wrong. Yeah, it was a gift from a family friend, and so
that's a good gift.
Yeah, it was.
But Nora, thanks so much for taking the time to do this, but more so it's like your contribution to the photography community and everything you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, this was fun.
Perfect. So there you have it. That was the Nora Lalle interview. Just want to thank Nora so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. It was real cool getting a chance to meet her while I was in San Francisco the other week. Big respect for her magazine, Pamplemousse. Definitely go check that out. I put the link in the description. Really beautiful magazine. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, if you aren't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, be much appreciated. I'm updating the YouTube channel with more videos and the podcast and much, much more coming. So definitely go hit the subscribe button. It'd be much appreciated. And also with today's episode, if you enter the promo code BANTER, you'll get 2 months free of the PicDrop image transfer tool. So go over to picdrop.com, enter the promo code BANTER, and you'll get 2 months free. And as always, thanks so much for listening, and take care.